I'm also going to address the panel when they come out this morning on Veterans Day. Just make sure nobody has any matters they need to address. Family matters, paying respects or something first thing in the morning. Some folks do that, but I do intend to move forward on Veterans Day and continue with the case. All right, as to the two open matters, let me address the CAD reports first. I was working through the testimony, and what I understood the investigator to testify to yesterday was that he had pulled information from the Glenn County Police database, and my notes, I don't have the actual name of it, but it was not the Glenn County Police database. What was a bit confusing to me, and what I think we were doing in cross-examination, Mr. Sheffield, is you had CAD reports, correct?
They are CAD reports, yeah.
Okay. And were the CAD reports limited to the Satilla Shores neighborhood?
They were limited to the Satilla Shores neighborhood, and in particular addresses within Satilla Shores.
Okay. So what I heard, and this is where the disconnect started in my mind, we were talking about the Glenn County database. I initially thought he had pulled information only because the state had requested it, but then it appears from his testimony associated with Greg McMichael's statements that he actually did do some follow-up in that database in order to, well, follow up. What I didn't hear is that he had pulled any CAD data, which is a different database. So what you've got is different information than what I heard him testify that he had done, that he had pulled, which to the court is important, because the question for him then is simply, did he pull the CAD reports? Does he know about them? If he does or doesn't, then I think that answers the question. If he does know about them, then I think it's wide open to cross. If it's limited to Satilla Shores, the explanation from the court is, I understand part of what the defense is trying to put up is that in support of Greg McMichael's statement that there were some things going on in the neighborhood. What those are, I don't know, and how important it is to the case. Ultimately, it's for the jury to determine. So, just to be clear, and I think I said this last night, the court's position is not that those CAD reports can't come in. I just don't think this is the witness for it. He never indicated that he pulled the CAD reports or would have any knowledge of it, and he wasn't asked about whether or not he would have knowledge of those CAD reports. So the court indicated I would think that through a little bit more. We were getting a little sidetracked last night. So to clarify, that's where the court is on the CAD reports.
Thanks for taking the time to look at it, and I understand what the court is saying.
On the 404B opening the door, the court is not, at this point, going to find that the state has opened the door. I understand the arguments of counsel. I've heard them. I understand the testimony about whether or not he was looked at as a suspect is something that I don't think is an argument that's just being thrown out there for the sake of throwing out there. I see that as a serious issue, and I understand that well, I understand, I think the parties understand, the court is very cognizant of whether that door gets opened at some point. In fact, has been told over and over again that that is a flag that may be raised, and if it comes up under appropriate circumstances, the court might rule differently. But at this point, based on the testimony that's been provided, the court is not going to get into, or allow the parties to get into the 404B evidence. I believe those are the two open matters the court has. I don't believe there are any additional open matters from yesterday.
Not from the state, Your Honor.
Not from Travis, but
Your Honor, my notes did correspond to the conclusions that you reached, with one exception that I wanted to place on the record. It does not seem that there was any indication that either Ms. Dunikoski or Officer Marcy was ever pooling the reports for the purpose of seeing if quote, Ahmaud Arbery was a suspect in those cases. They were pooling the reports to follow up either on the information Greg McMichael had provided about other crimes in the neighborhood and/or the request that Ms. Donikoski had made of that officer to go back to the reports they've pooled to address the issue of rising crime in the neighborhood, which the state rejects. So the insertion of the phrase whether Ahmaud Arbery was a suspect is what has tainted that evidence. And I wanted to place that on the record, and is what we would argue the reason why the 404B door is beginning to open here. It would be completely inappropriate for the state to question an officer about suspicions that officer had about Mr. Arbery's involvement in crime in Satilla Shores, Royal Oaks, Fancy Bluff, or Highway 17. As the state has indicated, it's all one big, very close area. So to intimate that Ahmaud was not a suspect in these reports, we all could tell that was kind of a useless question, because the officer, there's no way that he went and investigated a suspicious person report. And we're not allowed to get into the content of those suspicious persons reports in case those identifying characteristics are consistent with Ahmaud Arbery. We are following the court's ruling that we are not talking about Ahmaud Arbery's criminal history or suspicions of criminal acts outside of what was taking place at 220 Satilla Drive. So with that caveat, I wanted to state our position.
Right. Again, that's the defendant's position. The court has already ruled. I've made clear what my ruling is. All right. I understand that we're ready for the panel. Does the state have its next witness ready?
Yes, Judge, we do.
Okay. All right. Let's go get the panel.
All rise for the jury. Please be seated.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. All right, welcome back. We are ready to proceed. Before we do, I do want to take care of just a little bit of housekeeping and make sure everybody's aware of what the court's plan is as far as the schedule. Normally, Veterans Day is a holiday and the court is closed. But given the way this case is moving forward, what I'm planning on doing is keeping the court open on Veterans Day and moving forward on that day with testimony. Now, I do know that some, and obviously for good reasons, do pay respects or do other things on Veterans Day. So what I'd like to know from you, and you can go ahead, you don't need to tell me now, but send me a note if there's an issue that you have on Veterans Day, and I'll go ahead and see if I can get that addressed and make sure I understand exactly what that need is. But at this point, for planning purposes, do plan to be in court on Veterans Day. Okay? So Again, if you need to get a note to me, you're welcome to do so. But with that, that's all the housekeeping I've got for this morning. We are ready to proceed with the evidence, as I understand. Again, I want to thank you for being here with us in Glenn County and in the Superior Court. State ready to proceed.
Yes, Your Honor, the state's ready. At this time, the state will call Detective Roderic Nohilly.
Swear to tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I do. Go ahead and have a seat.
All right, Detective, please state your name and spell it for the record.
Roderic Nohilly, Roderic, last name Nohilly.
All right, Detective Nohilly, how are you currently employed?
I'm a sergeant on patrol at the Glenn County Police Department
And how long have you been with the Glenn County Police Department?
for 16 years.
And your entire time in law enforcement with the Glenn County Police Department?
No, I worked for Brunswick Police Department beforehand for about 3.5 years.
So you're coming up on 20 years.
I am.
All right. And are you currently a post-certified law enforcement officer?
I am.
And you're a sergeant over patrol, so what do you do now?
I supervise a patrol shift.
And those the officers who drive around the cars?
Yes.
All right. Do you drive around in a car?
I drive around in a car, yes.
All right. Do you respond to 911 calls?
I do.
Are you assigned to any particular baker?
No.
You're over all of them?
Yes.
All right. So at any point in time with your tenure in Glenn County, have you been assigned to CID or in any capacity investigating things like homicides, armed robberies, and things like that?
Yes, I was assigned as a criminal investigator in the Criminal Investigation Division.
And when was that?
The first time from 2010 to around 2014, the second from 2018 to a few months ago, well, beginning of this year.
Beginning of 2021.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. All right. So I'm going to direct your attention specifically to February 23rd, 2020, in the evening at the Glenn County Police Department headquarters. Were you present there at that time?
Yes.
All right. So what we're going to talk about specifically is an interview with Greg McMichael, okay?
Yes.
All right. Now, you're not the one who conducted the initial interview with Greg McMichael, did you?
No.
All right. You then became involved because you stopped by?
Yes.
Why'd you stop by?
I was standing by while someone else was doing a statement form. I was just waiting.
And did you know Greg McMichael prior to February 23rd of 2020?
I did.
Tell the jury how you knew Greg McMichael prior to February 23rd, 2020.
I knew him as one of the investigators at our DA's office here. He would come to our station, deliver subpoenas here and there, and I would talk to him. I knew him professionally.
And how long had you known him professionally?
Since at least 2005.
So, any personal relationship, like out to dinner or anything like that?
No.
So, when you stopped by, was he still in the interview room and was the recording still going?
Yes, it was. And yes, he was.
Sorry, that was a bad question. So, he was still in the interview room,
Yes, he was.
and you stopped by to talk to him.
Yes.
Did he agree to speak with you freely and voluntarily?
Yes.
And what was kind of the nature or tone of the conversation you had with him?
We were just talking about what happened. You know, he was telling me what happened.
All right, so I'm going to hand you what has already been marked and admitted into evidence as State's Exhibit 225A. All right. Prior to coming to court today, have you had an opportunity to review State's Exhibit 225A, the transcript of the interview with Greg McMichael?
I have.
All right. And I'm going to direct your attention at this time specifically to page 59 of that transcript. All right?
Okay.
All right. Now, I'm going to have you specifically give the jury the quotes from your conversation with him starting at line 2. What did you ask Greg McMichael?
What's his name? The one who owns this house.
Now, when you say the one who owns this house, what house are you referring to?
The house that was under construction a few doors down from his home.
Okay. And what was his answer to you?
I have no idea. Never met him. Never met him.
Okay. What is the next question that you asked Greg McMichael?
Did this guy break into a house today?
And what did Greg McMichael say in response from line 8 to line 13?
Well, that's just it. I don't know. That's what I told what's her name out there. I said, listen, you might want to go knock on doors down there because this guy had just done something that he was fleeing from. And I don't know, you might have gone, might have gone in somebody else's house.
Okay.
Or somebody's house.
All right. So when he says, that's just it, I don't know, that's what I told what's her name out there. Do you have any idea who what's her name out there is?
I'm assuming at the time it was Sergeant Oliver.
Okay. So he's talking about, I was telling a law enforcement officer out there that they needed to go figure out what he might have done.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and direct your attention then to the very next page, page 60 of the transcript. Direct your attention specifically to line 7. What did you ask him?
Have you ever seen him before?
And when you say, have you ever seen him before, who are you referring to?
Ahmaud Arbery. At the time, we didn't know his identity.
All right, so you didn't know what his name was at this time.
No.
So have you ever seen him before? What did Greg McMichael say?
No. I'd never laid eyes on the guy.
You then say, okay. What does Mr. McMichael then say?
Nobody in that neighborhood, or at least nobody that has seen the video, that this guy has a clue who he is.
All right. I know that was difficult. Okay. So nobody in that neighborhood, or at least nobody that has seen the video, that this guy has a clue who he is.
Yes.
All right. What did you ask next?
Did he put it out on Facebook or something, the video?
Now, who is he that you're talking about? Did he put it out on Facebook?
The owner of the house under construction.
All right. What was Mr. Greg McMichael's response?
I don't know. He may have, but
Okay, so he says, I don't know about this video being put out on Facebook.
correct.
All right. And then did you ask, how many people in the neighborhood have seen this video? And what was his response?
I know that Diego has, and
And then you were asking him who Diego was, right?
yeah, is Diego the other guy that came in? He says, Greg Michael says, no, that is,
So then you asked him who Diego was, right?
yes.
All right, so going on to the next page at the top, you're asking him who Diego is on line 3. What does Greg McMichael say so he can tell you who Diego is?
Diego is the little short Hispanic guy that lives like 2 doors down from that open house, the construction house.
All right. Was he able to give you Diego's last name?
No, I don't believe so.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and then direct your attention to specifically page 65. All right. And at this point in time, are you asking Greg McMichael to speculate as to what was going through the mind of Ahmaud Arbery? If you look at the line on page 64, would that help refresh your recollection about what you're talking about here?
Which line?
Take a look at lines 22 through 24 on page 64.
Yes.
Okay. So when asking Greg McMichael to speculate about what's going through the mind of Ahmaud Arbery, what does Greg McMichael say on lines 3 through 6?
He was trapped like a rat. I think he was wanting to flee, and he realized that something, he was not going to get away.
Okay. And then I think you indicated, and well, I'll ask you, what did you then say to him based on this? He was trapped like a rat. I think he was wanting to flee, and he realized he was not going to get away.
Yeah.
What'd you say?
Yeah, but he could have run around your son, right?
What's he say?
Sure.
Okay. And then what'd you say?
From what I can tell in the video, the whole road is there.
So you had seen the video at this point in time that you're talking to Greg McMichael.
I had seen it on scene briefly. Yeah.
Okay. So at that point in time, what does Greg McMichael say to you? Lines 12 through 16.
Oh, yeah. And he was much faster than Travis would ever be. He had opportunity to flee further, We had chased him around the neighborhood a bit, but he wasn't winded at all. Continue.
And then what's the next line, just on 16,
This guy he was in good shape.
Okay. Now, after speaking with Greg McMichael, was Greg McMichael then free to leave, and did he in fact leave?
Yes.
I will pass the witness, thank you. No, it actually will be Mr. Hogue. I'm just going to find that one map.
Behind the big one.
Thank you, Ron.
Good morning, Investigator Nohilly.
Good morning.
I'm Frank Hogue. I represent Greg McMichael. This is Laura Hogue, my wife-in-law partner. She represents him with me. I just have a few questions for you today. And I want to go back to where you were with the state just now. And let's start on page 59. And you were asked to read the section from lines 2 to 13. You tell me when you're with me. And this is the topic concerning no clue who he was, he referring to Ahmaud Arbery at that time on that date when this all happened, right? Got the context?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry, I was looking at the page.
Okay. This is a section where, and I just called it no clue who he was. That was the point of it, right? The section you read.
Right.
To that characteristic.
All right, well, we can reread it then if summing it up isn't good enough.
Let's just make sure he's on the same page. You're
All
fine.
right, you're at page 59, line 2. Go ahead and read 2 through 13 to yourself. That's what you read to the jury just a few minutes ago. Particularly lines 8 through 13 where Greg McMichael is telling you, that's just it, I don't know. That's what I told, and you said it was Sergeant Oliver that he was talking to. What's her name? He said, I said, listen, you might want to go knock on doors. because this guy's just done something that he was fleeing from, and I don't know, he might have gone in somebody's house. And your understanding in the context was when Mr. McMichael's telling you, I don't know, he didn't know the person's name.
Objection. As to this officer's understanding of their context, it's not relevant.
It's the context of what Mr. McMichael was saying to him that I'm trying to establish.
Well, again, you're asking him about what Greg McMichael was thinking and to explain his statements. Let's just rely upon his statements. If it's relevant in any other way, that's fine, but let's not have this witness characterize somebody else's statements in the record.
All right. Mr. McMichael couldn't tell you Ahmaud Arbery's name, could he?
Correct.
Because he said he didn't know his name, didn't he?
Correct.
All right. Well, let's go on with that page to get further context here. You go on to ask him, I'm at line 14, you were the first one to see him? That was a question from you. And Mr. McMichael said, yeah, well, I guess. I don't know if somebody else saw him running, think anything about it, but when he came past my house.
Objection. Mr. Hogue is just now reading this section as opposed to asking this officer what it is. In addition, it has absolutely nothing to do, it's not the rule of completeness, it has nothing to do with what was above at all.
I understand we're talking about context for statements. I understand these are the words of Greg McMichael. They've come in a couple different ways. Let's get to the context question. How's that? Let's make sure. Let's get to the question part of it.
This is a question. This is what Greg McMichael was saying to you immediately after telling you he didn't know the name of the person he saw running in his neighborhood, right? That's the context of what we're talking about. Correct?
As far as line 16 on?
Right.
Yes.
Okay. And so what I'm doing with you, Investigator Nohilly, is I'm just reading the words on the transcript and you're affirming, yes, that's what Greg McMichael said to me. That's the form of all these questions, all right? You with me?
Yes.
Okay, good deal. So going on, he says, but when he came past my house, he met the description of the guy that Travis had seen run in that empty house, 2 weeks ago or however long ago it was. You say, yeah. And Mr. McMichael, so far I'm reading accurately, am I not?
Yes.
And then at line 23, Greg McMichael, I mean, to a T. Plus he met the description of the video I had seen of this guy being in there. Short dreads, and go over to line 1 on page 60, you say, yeah. And then Mr. Greg McMichael says, white t-shirt, short pants, plus he was hauling ass. And this, he was running like people don't run normally. He wasn't out for no Sunday jog. He was getting the hell out of there. I read all that accurately?
Yes.
And in context, even though he's told you he doesn't know this person's name, he's telling you, in effect, why he suspected him and then chased him.
Question, characterization.
That's sustained.
Okay, you understood what he was talking about, right? I mean, you were involved in the conversation, and the words he was conveying back to you in response to your questions to him were understandable to you, were they not? You knew what he was talking about.
Yes.
Okay, very good, sir. Now, let's go over to page 65, the other part of the transcript the state just reviewed with you. They read the part on 65, page 3, line 3 rather, down to line 16. And line 16 is where the conversation was in the middle of Greg McMichael's comments to you about Ahmaud Arbery, where he said, I mean, this guy, he was in good shape. Are you with me?
Yes.
Okay. And then he goes on to say, in that same context, completing his thoughts to you, and there was no hesitation on his part when he came to Travis. I mean, his intention was to grab that gun and probably shoot Travis. That's in my mind. That's what I saw, you know. And with that in mind, if he'd had gotten that shotgun and there was any separation between Travis and him, I was going to cap his ass. And you understood he was describing to you the fight right at the very end of the confrontation that you perhaps had seen on video by this point. Is that what you understood the context of this to be?
I'm going to object as to his understanding of the context is. These are just the words of Greg McMichael. His understanding is not relevant.
Well, then that is the context in which he's saying these words. He's describing the final encounter between Ahmaud Arbery and Travis, and that he thought Ahmaud was trying to get the shotgun away from Travis to shoot him with it. That's what he's telling you, right?
Objection, counsel is now testifying.
So let's, again, this statement is coming through the witness. The statement's in. For context, you can ask the witness what he believes he was describing, but let's let the words, Mr. McMichael, what?
All right, for context, Investigator Nohilly, you understand what he's describing, right?
Yes.
And you understood what he was describing was his own thoughts that he was about to see his own son shot and killed by Ahmaud Arbery with his own shotgun.
Objection calls for speculation as to what this means by Greg McMichael.
At this point, we're simply asking what the witness understood based on his interview with with Mr. McMichael. Go ahead.
You need me to repeat it? You're allowed to answer. Okay. In the context of this conversation, you understood Greg McMichael to be telling you that what he thought when he was watching Ahmaud Arbery attack his son.
Objection, mischaracterization. Counsel's testifying. That is not at all what Greg McMichael said. Didn't use the word attack at all.
Okay, I'll use his words. His intention was to grab that shotgun and probably shoot Travis. That's in my mind. Those were his words, right?
Yes.
And you understood that what he was conveying to you was that he thought he was about to witness his son's death at the hands of Ahmaud Arbery.
Objection, speculation.
Yeah, the statement speaks for itself. It's sustained.
All right. Go over to page 67. See if we can get through this one.
State objection, anything on 67? We didn't bring up 67. That's not something he's testified to at all. So there is no rule of completeness here. This is a completely different page and topic.
That's not the case, Your Honor. And if I need to defend it without the jury here, I'd like to do so.
Let me go ahead and see what it is.
Let me see if I have notes written on here.
I'll show it. I'm bringing my computer.
Does anyone just have a clean copy of it? That's the easiest way to do it. Nobody's got a clean copy of page 67?
Yes, Judge. I do have one copy for you. Yes. It's just this. That's what you have. Well, that's true. Could you hand that to the judge?
That's that page.
Problem is, every time I move, I pull a cord out.
Your Honor, I'm at page 67, lines 8 through 17.
Eight through 18 and 67, you said?
Page 67, lines 8 through 17.
Through 17. Okay. I'll permit the question. Go ahead.
Now, before we read it, Investigator Nohilly, in your 20 years' experience and in your training and education, you've heard of a phenomenon before called auditory exclusion, where a person is so focused in a traumatic event, their vision might...
Objection. Counsel's testifying. He hasn't even given him an opportunity to say whether he knows what that word auditory, whatever it was, is.
I have him on cross-examination, and leading questions are allowed under 24-6, 611, B and C. We can look that up. These are proper questions.
Okay. Well, you asked him whether he knew what something was, and you're about to define it for him. That's the objection to the question.
To give him the orientation of what I'm talking about. He might know it by some other term. It has several different terms. I've used one of those terms. Do you know auditory exclusion? Have you heard of that one?
I have. I don't recall
Okay.
what it means.
Well, let me help see if this refreshes your recollection. You've heard of it. It's the occasion when a person in a traumatic situation.
Objection. At this point, counsel is testifying by telling him what this means.
It's a leading question.
It's over. Go ahead.
So an auditory exclusion, you're in a traumatic situation, and of your senses, your vision will retain its best abilities, but your hearing and other senses, auditory hearing in particular, might tune out sounds, and you don't hear and you don't recall accurately, but you can also describe what you saw, but not what you heard. That's what you recall from your training that happens sometimes to people in highly traumatic or unusual situations like a shooting.
I don't recall if that's exactly what I learned.
Is it a phenomenon you're familiar with by whatever name?
The term, yes.
Okay. So let's go to this paragraph here. 67 page, or line 8. You ask Greg McMichael, was he hit all 3 times? Or, now the he is Ahmaud Arbery, right?
Yes.
And the hit means hit with 3 shots from Travis's shotgun, right?
Correct.
And Greg McMichael answers, there was only 2 shots. See that?
Yes.
And you say, no, there were 3, right?
Correct.
And he says, were there 3 shots? Asks you that, right?
Yes.
And you say, on the video, it sounds like there's 3. You'd seen the video, right?
Yes.
Sounds like there's 3. Greg McMichael says, I don't think so. I mean, it may have been 3. I don't know. But like I say, it was a fur ball. It was a hair ball. But he thought he heard 2, and you heard 3, and there's 3 on the video, right?
From what I remember, yes.
Yeah. And when you, you probably arrested many people through your 20-year career, right?
I have.
And when you do that, and you try to keep the person from fleeing from you, you will use verbal commands like stop, don't run, stay where you are, that kind of thing.
Yes.
And if you have to raise your voice to give a stronger verbal command, you will do that.
Yes.
And if the person is still not compliant, you'll sometimes draw your weapon if you need to, won't you?
Only in certain circumstances.
Like when they're not listening to you in your verbal commands, not stopping.
No.
Yeah. No what?
No, I don't just pull my gun.
Okay. You'll do other steps before you pull your gun to get them to comply with you?
Yes.
Like what? Raising your voice even higher? Louder?
Maybe.
All right. Well, you'll do whatever the circumstances require. You're not just going to forget about it and go home. All right?
Correct?
All right. And if the person is still not complying with your verbal commands, and you're waiting for someone to come back you up, like other police officers, at some point, if you think the person is either going to attack you or flee, you will use your weapon, will you not?
Not always, no.
If the person is attacking you,
Depends on how he's attacking me, or she.
all right, if you have a gun on you and the person is attacking you, you would have a concern that the person might take your gun from you and use it to harm you or kill you.
Once again, it depends on the circumstances and the person.
All right. If the circumstance includes being attacked by someone who seems to be trying to take your gun from you, putting his hands on it, you might use your gun, wouldn't you?
At that point, it might meet the threshold, yes.
Thank you, Investigator Nohilly.
Mr. Sheffield?
Yes. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Jason Sheffield. I represent Travis McMichael. We haven't spoken before, have we?
I don't believe so.
I'd like to talk generally with you about investigation and your role in this particular investigation. Was it that you were charged with, I will do it. Was it that you were charged with gathering just information from Greg McMichael and Travis McMichael? And that was the sole job that you had in this particular case?
Yes.
Just to perform the interviews?
Yes.
Okay. And you were directed to do so by Investigator Lowry?
I'm not sure exactly. I was told at the scene to go back to the station and do the interviews.
You'll have to speak up just a little bit. You're dropping
I'm
off.
sorry.
That's,
I was told, I'm not sure exactly by who, I think it was one of my supervisors possibly, to go to the station and do the interviews.
prior to the interviews, though, you had a debriefing with whomever was in charge so that they could give you some background information about what had happened that day based on their observations?
No.
So did you go into these interviews not knowing what had happened out there in Satilla Shores?
Correct.
Literally, you didn't know
Outside
the order of
scene-
events or anything like that?
Right, outside of seeing that video, no.
Okay, so seeing the video, the video that you saw, did it include Mr. Arbery running and then turning around and the driver of the car dropping the phone for about a minute and then it being picked back up and then filming as Mr. Arbery comes around the corner towards the shooting? Or did you just see the shooting
I
portion?
think I just saw the shooting part of
Okay,
it.
so not even the entire video?
Right, I didn't see the whole video.
Okay, so you're stepping into a situation where you really don't know much other than that there's been a shooting.
Correct.
And did you say you were on the scene that day
I had gone up to the scene,
You had
yes.
gone, how long were you on the scene before you left to go do interviews?
Like 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay, so you're really kind of an open book when you head into these interviews, not having anything in your mind that you're trying to get out of these individuals, just that you're trying to understand what happened.
Correct.
Okay, so in your mind then, you are trying to understand the dynamics of what Greg McMichael and Travis McMichael were doing out there that day,
Correct.
and what Mr. Arbery was doing out there that day,
Correct.
what Greg McMichael's intent was, based on whatever he told you, right?
Correct.
And you conducted an interview of Travis McMichael as well, so what Travis McMichael's intent was out there that day.
I'm going to object at this time. We're not going into Travis McMichael's interview at all. So I don't know why we're talking about it with this witness.
Just asked if he'd done it.
Yeah, he's interviewed Travis McMichael, I'm gonna ask him about it. I'm not gonna get into statements made.
Okay, all right.
You were trying to determine what Travis McMichael's intent was that day,
Correct.
and what Mr. Arbery's intent was that day.
Correct.
Okay. In doing so, you got some information about ongoing crime in the neighborhood.
I'm going to object. Now we're going into content.
I'll rephrase it so that.
Thank you.
When you talked to Greg McMichael, you got information that there was some ongoing crime in the neighborhood.
You'll have to direct me to a line. I don't recall exactly.
Okay, just as you sit here, do you recall whether or not you talked with Greg McMichael about crime in the neighborhood?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Did you endeavor after this interview to go and follow up about the crime in the neighborhood, to pull any reports or anything like that?
I don't think it was me that did it. I think I passed that on information on to other investigators, and they did.
Okay, that's fine. You didn't do it, that's fine. In stepping into a situation where you're going to be conducting an interview of a person just involved in a violent situation like this one, you have been trained how to interview individuals, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. You have some basic training that you go through about how to interview people. Have you had more advanced training on how to conduct interviews of suspects or people involved in traumatic situations?
I have.
Is it fair to say that it's important to have that training because interviewing someone can be a bit of a chaotic experience?
Correct.
The person that you're interviewing could be all over the map in terms of the timeline of the event.
Correct.
You may have to stop them because it can get very confusing and kind of redirect them back to moments that they can then break down and further explain to you.
Correct.
And is it fair to say that your training has helped you become the person kind of in charge of that process?
Correct.
To help that person through their statement so that it can ultimately be understood by you.
Correct.
Okay, because what you know is that whatever the garbled or asynchronous timeline that you could get needs to be understood eventually by lawyers in the case.
Correct.
So you may have to follow back up on something to get more clarity so that it can be further fleshed out.
Yes.
And not only do you know that the lawyers in the case are going to rely on it, but you know that it's going to be used here in court, possibly.
Correct.
And that the work that you're doing to flush out these subjects and to dig deeper into what's being said is possibly going to need to be understood by the court as well as a jury.
Yes.
All right, so you're going to do your best to try to follow up on things so that the interview that you conduct is as accurate and complete and truthful as it can be.
Correct.
Okay. Now, you did interview Travis.
Yes.
You spent a good bit of time with him, maybe an hour or longer.
Yes.
Okay. He was speaking quickly during that interview at times, wasn't he?
I'm gonna, once again, we're not introducing the statements of Travis McMichael. So going through all of this, I would object, as it's not relevant.
Here's what's interesting. He conducted an interview.
I object to his speaking.
Well,
Let me, because I think I need to work out exactly what's going on here. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask that you go ahead and step into the jury room for just a moment while we address the matters before the court.
All right for the jury. Please be seated.
All right. Sergeant, if I could get you to just step down. If you just step out of the courtroom, we'll bring you back in for further testimony.
Yes, sir.
Okay, somebody give me a little context here.
Sure, at this point in
Well,
time.
hold on. Maybe a better way to do it. Let me explain what I understand and I can say. So Travis McMichael's statement, I'm guessing, is not being used because there's too many issues to work through with Bruton that it's just not being used. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor. Yesterday morning, we informed the defense that we had made a decision not to tender or present any statements of Travis McMichael once they informed us that they basically wanted the entire thing in for rule of completeness. And we made the decision and informed them we're not tendering in Travis McMichael's statement at all, as currently right now hearsay. I talked with Mr. Rubin this morning and I said, listen, I don't even want to go into the fact that he went ahead and interviewed Travis McMichael because we're not tendering it in. Because now the jury is looking at us like we're hiding his statement. And my fear, of course, is that, I'll back up. The state's a little frustrated because the state has endeavored to communicate to the defense that we were not going to put this in. In fact, this morning I told Mr. Rubin, I'm not even going to ask this witness about Travis McMichael's statement at all. I'm going to just strictly have him on the stand to talk about Greg McMichael. And I informed them of that. And I was told, that's fine. We can recall him at a time if it becomes necessary, if Travis McMichael takes the stand. So at this point in time, having not gone into it, the state's fear is that it appears to the jury that, oh, there's this statement of Travis McMichael out there, and I've been put in the position of having to object about the contents of it and tell them we're not tendering it, which of course makes it look like the state's hiding this statement from them when that's not the intention. The state's been put in an awkward position. The state would like a curative instruction, and that's what we're asking for.
Okay. So, as I understand it, the state asked to put in certain statements of Travis McMichael. We responded and said we think this helps the rule of completeness. They chose not to put the statement in, and I'm not offering any of his statement. I'm not going to say anything that Travis McMichael said, although there are probably some exceptions under excited utterance. I'm still not putting those in. That being said, the state's decision not to tell the jury that he was even interviewed, that's on them. I'm not hiding something. It would be as if in a car accident case, a police officer testifies about something through the plaintiff and the defense comes up and says, hey officer, didn't you also talk to a witness and didn't you also collect this information and didn't you also investigate these other things? They chose not to bring it up. I'm not doing anything that's untoward. I'm simply informing the jury that, number one, he was interviewed. Number two, certain conduct and behavior was seen by this officer that he voluntarily cooperated in the interview.
Okay, we're not going to get into the problem with asking him about the way he was reacting is it opens the door to what questions were being asked at the time and the context of those reactions, which then possibly gets us into the statement. That's my concern about that. The fact that he was interviewed, that's fine, or the fact that he cooperated is fine. But once we start describing his actions during the interview, I'm not sure how you separate that from what was going on in the interview at the time.
He appeared stressed. He was speaking quickly. Those are my questions.
In an hour-long interview, at what point during the interview, what was he being asked about?
I'm not going to go into that. And the
Well,
jury's left without the information about it. But Judge, that doesn't make it impermissible. I would say to the court, it doesn't make it
Without the
impermissible.
context, because I understand the statement's not coming in, we're not going to talk about it, it's an hour-long statement. I don't know, and the jury doesn't know what was going on at the moments that he could possibly be described, because what you are implying is that during that entire 1 hour period, he was acting exactly the same way.
I can clear that up. I mean, I feel like the court is telling me how to conduct. If the subject matter is relevant, that's my question.
I don't believe it is, because without the statement coming in, describing his conduct while giving that statement, without explaining what the statement is, the court finds impermissible. So the beginning of this and the end of that, I don't know, the court is going to allow you to go into. But as far as what he was doing, how this officer was perceiving his reactions, we're not going to get into that. Did he cooperate? Sure. Did he give a statement? That's fine.
Will the court allow me to ask the witness the subjects that he inquired of?
No, because then we're getting into the statement.
That he asked about, not what Travis said in response.
Because then we're getting into the statement.
Okay. I think those would be permissible areas, but I'll follow the ruling of the court and I won't ask those questions.
All right. Let's.
Yeah, I would like to say, in light of the state's comments, that it was the Bruton problem that primarily drove their decision not to go into any of Travis McMichael's statement. Bruton problem, of course, being that he would incriminate Greg McMichael. We don't have a Bruton problem in Travis McMichael's statement. There's many parts of it that have been highlighted in yellow that were worked out. It looks to me like every bit as much as was in Greg McMichael's statement that we've just spent part of yesterday and part of today doing. So our position is that for us, I was under the impression that it was probably not going to be introduced because it's so exculpatory, and the state was making the decision, well, he'll have to get up there and tell his story himself. We're not going to do it through our witness. But if it's a Bruton problem, then any issue we have made before regarding Travis McMichael's statement with respect to Bruton, we withdraw. And so that's not an impediment for our client.
Well, that may cure it for the state, and they may want to get back up and do it, but I don't
Your
know where we
Honor,
are.
Travis McMichael's statement is hearsay. It would come in if the state chose to tender it as the statement of a party opponent. The state is choosing not to tender it as a statement of a party opponent. So none of those issues apply. It's the state's decision not to tender in that hearsay under that exception.
But it sounds like it doesn't change where the court is on it.
Yeah, and I would ask the court, there's no need for a curative instruction at this point.
Yeah, we're just going to bring the panel
Also,
back in.
real quickly, Judge, I was also going to ask him whether or not Travis demonstrated positions with how he was holding the firearm. And that demonstration, again, I thought would be not a statement, but just in response to the question of how he demonstrated certain things for him. That he cooperated, he demonstrated, he spoke, those kinds of things.
Yeah, no, that's, the court would be consistent. Again, to explain the context of that, you'd have to get into the statement, why he was doing that at a particular time and what the questions were that led him to that. So again, that gets into the statement itself.
So I will not do it based on the court saying I may not do it. I cannot do it.
Correct.
Okay.
All right. Let's go get the witness. back, Sergeant. All right, you can go ahead and be seated. I'll remind you you're under oath. I say you can be seated. I think you're going to stand up in just a second. Let's go get the panel.
All rise for the jury. Please be seated.
All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Sheffield.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So, we were talking about that you conducted an interview of Travis McMichael.
Yes.
Yes. And one of the things that you do when you conduct an interview is you want to make sure that the person you interview understands that they don't have to speak to you, right?
Correct?
As we call this the Miranda admonition, that they have the right to be silent, right?
Correct?
They have the right to a lawyer.
Objection, at this point in time, we're going into the interview.
I'm just going to Miranda.
I'll give you some flexibility here, but that's,
To be short, Travis agreed to be interviewed.
Yes.
Okay. He cooperated with that interview fully and freely.
Yes.
Now, one of the things you were asked about just a moment ago is Greg's statement to you and Greg's expressions to you about Mr. Ahmaud Arbery and whether he was trying to run or flee or how he could have run or taken other routes or whatnot. You recall that line of questioning by Mr. Hogue?
Yes.
Okay. Did you ever undertake it yourself after speaking with Greg McMichael to try to figure out any background on Mr. Arbery?
I did not.
You did not.
Not me.
Not you. But you're aware that others may have.
Yes.
Okay. Lastly, when you've been an officer for how many years, did you say?
Just under 20 years,
20 years, doing patrol.
including patrol, yes.
And you have investigated crimes of break-ins,
I have.
crimes of theft,
I have.
crimes of burglary.
I have.
And one of the things that you've come to understand is that burglary doesn't just happen at night, right?
Correct.
It happens in the middle of the day sometimes,
Yes.
in particular on Sundays.
I don't know if it's particularly on Sundays.
If you look at page 72, isn't that what you discussed with Greg McMichael? Starting at line 10.
Yes.
Usually on Sunday.
Yes,
What you
that's
said.
what I said, yes.
Nothing further, thank you.
anything from Mr. Brown?
No, Your Honor.
Can you redirect?
Sure. Investigator Nohilly. Right after you said, usually on Sunday, what did Greg McMichael say?
Sorry. That's right, that's right.
Then what did he say?
People are home on Sundays.
People are home on Sundays. All right. And at the time of this interview, this was, how many hours after the incident had taken place?
A couple hours, I think. I'm not exactly sure, but it was within 2 or 3 hours of the incident.
Okay, so 2 or 3 hours of the incident,
Yes.
you believe? Okay. Now we've heard it.
Anything on those limited issues?
Hang on. No question.
Hang on. Thank you, sir. You may step down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You are excused for the day, but subject to recall.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. Thanks, sir. It's okay early.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and take a 15-minute recess, and we'll come back for the continuation of evidence in this case.
Call rise for adjournment. Please be seated.
All right, if we can have the state's next witness ready to go in 15 minutes, the 10:30. All right, thank you, everybody. Pardon?
I believe it being stubborn.